Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're on. Martin's wielded the magic finger and muted you all. So sorry about that, but it's time to start. Welcome to yet another, well, very interesting afternoon. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not Steve Roud. I'm afraid he's had to go off and get an eye problem sorted. It doesn't look as if it's serious, but he may be able to drop in later. So I'm going to be worryingly in charge. And if anything occurs to Martin that we ought to be telling you, then we will. But other than that, I think we can get on with our meeting. And first of all, I'm really pleased to introduce Clary Croft to you. We've had the pleasure of spending quite a lot of time with Clary and Sharon, had lots of fun. He's taken us out to some beautiful places to see where singers lived and the sort of things that they did. And Clary has a whole load of different attributes that he's been involved with over his lifetime in all sorts of areas. But this afternoon, as you know, he's going to be talking to us about his friendship with Helen Creighton and the work he's done with her. So, Clary, if you're ready, and Martin organises you.
You're muted, Clary.
Not be in the way too much.
Got it now. There we go. Almost like we knew what we were doing, which is why thank you very much to Martin for working on the slides and the audio clips for me, because I'm not that technically adept. So this afternoon, I want to talk about my mentor and friend, Helen Creighton, and how her collection has influenced my life. Here's a photograph of me and Helen taken in the 1980s at her former home in Dartmouth, which is the sister city to Halifax in Nova Scotia. Martin, am I able to see those slides? Or what am I looking at now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, there we go.
Yes, it's far better to see that than.
Sorry.
So Helen Creighton was born in Dartmouth in 1899 to a family that traces its origins in Nova Scotia to the founding of Halifax in 1749. Helen's family of Creightons and Alboroughs were pivotal members of the commercial and the social population in that area. And her home in Evergreen, which is where this photograph was taken, has played an important part in her family's legacy, including its present status as the home of the Dartmouth Heritage Museum Society. So here's a photograph of that home at Evergreen. It was built in 1867, which is Canada's inaugural year. So it's considered what we call a centennial house, and it's now a heritage property. Helen's accomplishments began when she was a young woman and continued until her death in 1989, when she was recognized as one of the most influential collectors of folklore in the world. As a teenager, she narrowly escaped injury from broken glass during the 1917 Halifax explosion, which at the time was the largest man-made explosion before Hiroshima. At that time, she immediately borrowed her father's car and began transporting the wounded and displaced people to safety. She went on to teach school in Mexico, trained briefly and worked as a social worker, had a successful early career as a journalist, and was an early radio pioneer, writing and reading stories on air as Aunt Helen. She aspired to be a full-time writer, and it was this vocation that led her down what she was to call her path of destiny. In 1928, while looking for leads for a story about pirates and pirate lore, she was directed to Eastern Passage, which is at the mouth of Halifax Harbor. And there she met people who knew pirate stories and also sang pirate songs. And the first person that she met that could sing a song for her was a man by the name of Enos Hartland. We have a photograph of Enos here. She said that was her light bulb moment and became the direction for a career collecting folklore from the maritime provinces in Canada. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Nova Scotia. And this work would eventually bring her national and international recognition. So Her collection, which she donated to the province of Nova Scotia, is now catalogued and housed at the archives and is considered by many to be the largest individually collected body of folklore in the nation. There are other folklorists like Edith Folk and Dr. Marius Barbeau who had other people add to their collection. But as far as we know, Dr. Creighton's, in fact, Edith Folk suggested it was this way, that Dr. Creighton's collection was the largest individually collected body of work in folklore in Canada. So it represents songs, stories, oral history, material collected during World War II as part of a joint effort with the Library of Congress in the United States, research on material culture and the arts, and a photographic record unmatched in documentation of the tradition bearers in the Maritimes. Her collection includes material from the early cultural groups represented in Maritime Canada, including the Mi'kmaq, Acadian, British, Celtic, African Nova Scotian, and German. Her published works include song anthologies, collections of traditional and tradition and beliefs and customs, in such works as her best-selling book on the supernatural, Blue-Nosed Ghosts, and for being the person who collected and brought forward what is Nova Scotia's unofficial anthem. It's called the Nova Scotia Song, or more affectionately known as Farewell to Nova Scotia. Here's a photograph of Helen working at her desk in Evergreen. This was taken around the 1950s, late 1950s, and I was very privileged in that Helen actually willed that desk to me, and I used it for 20 years and wrote 5 books from it. And I recently just gave it back to the Dartmouth Heritage Museum Society, and it now takes a place of honor in a room of displays about Dr. Creighton. Her recognitions have included the Order of Canada, several honorary doctorates, citations from major international folkloric societies, a permanent exhibit on her life and work at her former home Evergreen House, and most recently, in 2018, the Government of Canada and Parks Canada has erected a plaque outside Evergreen House in recognition of Helen's life as a pioneering folklorist. Her living legacy continued with the work carried on by the Helen Creighton Folklore Society. Here's a little icon from the society. And the society's mandate is to encourage and promote work that reflects the diverse folk culture of the Maritimes, as exemplified by the work begun by Dr. Creighton. And of course, anybody interested in that can just go on helencreighton.org and find out some more information. So I want to just ask Martin to bring up my face on the screen for a couple of seconds and just give you some ideas of how I got connected with Helen, and also where I come from in the field of traditional music and traditional folklore. The next photograph I want to show you, thank you again, Martin, is of my great-grandmother, Cora McDermott Burns. She was the one that influenced me tremendously in my singing. If you have that slide, Martin, of Cora Burns. There we go. I think we're not seeing it, but there we go. There we go. Yeah, my dear great-grandmother, Cora Burns, she was the one that taught me my folk songs and kept me going with a lot of traditional lore. And then, because I was involved in music all my life, I was invited to participate in a national television show called Sing Along Jubilee in Canada. It was on for many, many years. And here's a photograph of me on the set performing on Sing Along Jubilee. You see quite a difference here in the fact that, well, I think the major difference you're going to see is that I'm carrying a guitar when I'm not. Oh yeah, and the hair, that's also a slight difference as well. And then with my work with Sing Along Jubilee, I realized I didn't want to be on the road as a working musician all the time, and I wanted to pursue more of my work in folk music. So I was born in Sherbrooke, Nova Scotia, and they had recently just opened up a living historical museum. So I applied to them and suggested that they have a wandering troubadour. So this next picture shows me in the weaving studio at Sherbrooke, singing the songs that I collected and the songs from Helen's collection. And actually, I also learned to weave there, which I then became quite an accomplished weaver. So now if we can go back to me, Martin, thank you. I knew when I was working in Sherbrooke, I needed more folk songs, but I didn't know Helen. So I looked her name up in the phone book and I called her up and I told her what I was doing. And she very generously sent me a list of songs from the Sherbrooke area, even many songs from her unpublished collection. And then she said, when you come back to town, come and meet me. So Sharon and I, my wife and I, went over and met Helen, and we had tea at her place. It was pretty imposing to meet this famous folklorist, and we had a little chat. And then at the end, we were getting ready to leave. We stood up, and she looked me in the eye and she said, well, aren't you going to sing for me? And I thought, okay, this is the test. So I didn't worry about whether or not I had a guitar. So I knew enough about that traditional folk singers sang a cappella. So I stood in her parlor and I sang, driftwood is burning blue, wild walk the wild shadows, night winds go riding by the locky meadows, onto the ring of day flows my stream singing, Kadilgulo laddie, lo laddie, sleep the stars away. Helen had collected that song. It's from a poem by Kenneth Leslie in an old pipe tune. But when I finished, she walked over to me and she took both my hands in hers and she looked at me with those bright, steely blue eyes and she said, you'll do just fine. And that was like an anointing of being able to do that. So I worked with her over many years. She basically brought me into the fold. She had me do some secretarial work for her. Then she took me out when she was doing talks and I sang. And then eventually, because of her age, then she was saying, well, I'm not available, but Clary Croft can go out and do it. Well, I'm sure they were very disappointed not having Helen Creighton, but at least they had something. And then it gradually worked that we developed a friendship and a mentorship. And when the time came for her to donate her collection to the Public Archives of Nova Scotia, I was appointed archivist, and I worked for 3.5 years working with Helen Creighton. And it's very good from an archival point of view when you actually are fortunate enough to have the progenitor still alive to answer questions. And Helen was a font of information with an encyclopedic memory. I would be listening to something and I would call up and I'd say, Helen, I'm just listening to such and such, and she'd say, oh yes, that was September of 1946, and I remember that day, and here's who was with me. So when you get that kind of background going into a collection, it really, really helps. Of course, we're talking about folk songs today, and I made a point when I was when I was going through the folk song collection of saying, I wonder how long it would take to listen to everything that Helen had. And I did a diary, and it took me 40 weeks of 8-hour days just to listen to everything she had recorded. So what I'd like to do now is share some of those snippets with you to give you an idea of the scope of Helen's collection. So this first photograph is a picture of Helen and with children, and she's toting a wheelbarrow. Now this is the iconic picture of Helen, and a lot of people say, oh, she traveled with this wheelbarrow around. That's a melodeon she has. She used to pick out the tunes with that, just a small keyboard. But that she really only used this on Devil's Island, and it was an island at the mouth of Halifax Harbor. And there she met one of her most prolific singers, and we can see a picture of him and Helen. His name is Ben Henneberry. And this is Ben Henneberry. Now you can see that Ben has a slight paralysis in his face. By the time Helen was able to have recording machines on Devil's Island, you could notice that he had a slur in his speech, but he still sang well. And here is the August 8th recording, 1943, of Ben Henneberry singing False Night Upon the Road.
Harry when you buy, but Harry when you pack, I walk like Kitty Kyle and go. I have a little plum and I see the weather. You look at you put a little Kyle on 7 years old.
So Ben is also giving an example of what we call mouth music or chin music or diddlin'. And it's, in fact, he used to say, if the lighthouse keeper, Ken Faulkner, wasn't available to play the fiddle and they wanted to have a dance, Ben would do imitate the fiddle music or the pipe music while they danced. Another of Helen's most prolific singers and a lady with a beautiful voice was Catherine Gallagher. And here's a photograph of Helen, a professional photograph taken by a photographer named Bollinger at the parlor of the lighthouse. Mr. Gallagher, who was playing the accordion, was the lightkeeper of the lighthouse at the mouth of Halifax Harbor. And of course, Catherine looked after her family and raised them there. She had a beautiful voice. And in fact, Helen would take people like Alan Mills or Pete Seeger, if they came to visit her, she would take them out to the lighthouse. Can you imagine a more beautiful setting to be at a lighthouse overlooking Halifax Harbor and hearing the beautiful voice of Mrs. Gallagher? Here she is singing the Broken Ring song at Chebucto Head in 1943.
As a sailor walked all in a garden, a pretty maiden he chanced to spy. It was for to view her, he stepped up to her and said, "Fair lady, can you fancy I?" She said, "7 years since my love has left me, and 7 years since I did him see. Another 7 I'll wait upon him. Perhaps he'll come back and marry me."
Catherine Gallagher. If we can go back to me on the screen now, thanks, Martin. Helen first started to collect Gallic material in the 1930s, before many people were even terribly interested in it. And she did this first foray into getting Gallic material with her field researcher at the time, her friend Doreen Senior. And I know Martin has given some excellent presentations on Doreen Senior that you can probably find in the archives of the Society. But to give you an idea of what some of the Gallic songs sound like, here's a song. It's called the Matchmaking Song. It's about a girl, very one of those typical stories of the girl who makes a shirt for her lover and he goes away, but he comes back years later to arrive on the eve of her wedding of another. And here's William MacDonald in Marion Bridge, Cape Breton in 1956, talking a little bit and singing just a snippet of the Matchmaking Song.
None of those met him, and he says, "Could I stay for the night?" "Yes, but you won't get much sleep here tonight. There's matchmaking here tonight." "I see," he says. "That'd be all right. It won't bother me. I only want the shelter of the roof for the night." And they were all singing songs, and she made him a shirt before she left and put a heart in the bosom of the shirt, you see. And he never put the shirt on till that night, and he put it on. And they were asking the stranger, singing a song, a Gaelic song. And, "Oh, I'll try," he says. Anyway, and he started the song. The song went this way. Cúram le man seo chuminjo, rúna caranya minje yorst. Cúram le man seo chuminjo, cúram le man rúna nínak.
With a lot of the Gaelic songs, it goes on for quite a while, but I'll just give you a snippet of what the sounded like. I want to look at photo number 12. Thanks, Martin. These are a group of Mi'kmaq singers that Helen photographed in 1948. Now, the Mi'kmaq are the traditional First Nations in our part of Canada, and this was taken in Shubenacadie in 1948. And Chief William Paul is the fellow in the feathered headdress. And to give you an idea of, here's a Mi'kmaq song that Helen was able to record from Mr. Paul.
It was once, there was a great warrior, one man by name Stephen Joseph. He was one of the great warriors of Mi'kmaqs. And this is the song that he used to sing, and now who is going to sing it is by name William Paul. Roanuda, 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 gina he, hea hea ne, hea hea ne, he ge na, roanuda, No, come on, do down this, you Akadawa Pakmawaji do till the Numeg Labisa and Doa. I'm sitting now will Sigaga to Nenu down days when they make Sigua. Migama, we got a trick by ditch, got up to down, they'll be when make seat. I don't know what seat.
Recordings like this are incredibly important because it gives you an idea of the older language. Mi'kmaq is actually being taught in a lot of the Mi'kmaq communities nowadays, but the linguists, the Mi'kmaq linguists, are actually going back and listening to these kinds of recordings so they can hear how the old people spoke. Now, the other non-English language that Helen collected in was Acadian French. The Acadians were the early French settlers in our part of the world. And in fact, at the age of 89, she was able to bring out her last book called La Fleur de Rosier, working with the great Acadian scholar Ronald Labelle. And here's a song from this. Now, I want to tell you just a quick little story about this. When I started to work with Helen, she wouldn't really correct me if I maybe did something wrong, but she would say, in fact, this song I sang at a concert once, and afterwards she came up and she said, are you free in a couple of days to come over to the archives with me? I want to play you the recording of Mrs. McNeil, Laura Irene McNeil in Pubnico West, 1955, singing this song. The moment she played it for me, she didn't have to tell me anything. I knew that I just wasn't interpreting it the right way, but that's the way that she guided me through these things. So here's that recording of Laura Irene McNeil, who really helped Helen a great deal, learning a lot about her Acadian material. And it's a little lullaby called Do Do, Go to Sleep Little Baby.
Do do lefty baby, say I'm a man lefty baby. Do 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 lefty baby. Demain si fa beau, j'irai sur grand-père. Do 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 do. Do do la petit bibi, do la beau petit bibi, ah mam.
Helen very often made good friendships with her singers, with her tradition bearers. And one of those people was Fred Redden. Here's a picture of Fred with his wife, Sadie. And I was very fortunate by working with Helen in the early years when I also was able to meet some of the older living tradition bearers from whom she collected. Fred and I became friends, and in fact, we did a few concerts together. And Marg, you will probably remember him going up to the Miramichi Folk Song Festival and being quite a star up there too. Fred sang well into his 70s when he was tragically hit with an automobile and killed. So I was not going to play a recording that Helen made of him, but this is another recording of Fred singing the same song that he recorded for Helen Creighton, but this time still in his 70s now, in the 1980s, and singing a variant of the beautiful The Wind That Shakes the Corn.
I sat within the valley green, in the glen of Aherlow. I sat and thought I'd choose between old Erin or my love. I looked at her and then I thought how Ireland was torn, how soft the wind blew down the glen and shook the golden corn.
Thank you, Martin. We can stick my face back on the screen for a second or two. Helen was also very astute in collecting material that is almost completely gone now. In Lunenburg County, we had a large settlement of Germans. In fact, part of my heritage, my name is Croft, but it was originally Kraft when Jacob and Georg Kraft came to Canada in 1750, and the Lunenburg County area still has a very strong German heritage. So Helen was collecting German heritage in the 1940s. In fact, there's a story of her going down one of the long country roads, and the spring frogs were so loud that she got out and recorded, and the children came by, and she had to put the earphones on them to let her, because they'd be taking it back and saying, there's a strange lady in a car in the middle of the war, taping things in Germany, so or in a German community. So you know, she had to be very careful with that. But I want to play a little bit of a song for you. This is called the Sweetheart Song, and it's basically it says, "I'm sick. My father and my mother come to my bed, but I tell them you're not the one I'm sick for." So here's Danny Slongwhite, Mahone Bay, June 18th, 1948, singing "Krank Krank."
Krank, krank bin ich und Herzen aber nicht und Herzen besorgen, krank bin ich doch. Kommt meiner Vater und besucht mich, doch stell ich mich so hin und ich sag in meine Sünde und beschließe, wo ich krank so bin.
Helen was very fortunate as well to collect material in the African Nova Scotian community. Here's a photograph of William Riley and Rose Mann. Rose is his daughter. Helen collected this particular song I want to play for you in 1948. And I was able to actually meet and interview Rose Mann just shortly after her 100th birthday. And she remembered vividly coming to the house. Now, this is the only song I want to play the whole thing, because this is the kind of song when I'm illustrating folk music to people, I say it isn't just ditties. These were people's lives. And here is Helen Creighton and Rose trying to get Mr. Riley to sing this song called "No More Auction Block for Me." And understandably, it's very moving for him. So I want you to hear the pathos in this particular recording, because this is what I call the real McCoy. Here's William Riley, Cherrybrook, 1948, singing "No More Auction Block for Me."
Will you sing that?
Well, I don't care much about singing. My own pieces at all.
Well, they're good, Papa. They're good.
I know they're good, but they used to do my color so
we have
so
to
bad
that
at one
now.
time.
This is a different world. Yeah, that's sure is a different world now. They have to sing them so that we know them. So they'll remember them. They remember how our foreparents was. That's right. They make them. They never stop singing in the States. No. They never stop singing in the States. Never. Them songs will never die. No. You're right. And it's only the older generation can sing them. Yes, quite. Well, that's why we.
No more auction block for me. No more. Oh, poor Uncle Tom was dying then.
Yes.
No more auction block for me. Many 1,000 gone. Jesus died on Calvary. Oh yes, oh yes. Jesus died to set me free. Thank him evermore. No more pint of salt for me. No more. No more pint of salt for me. Many 1,000 gone. No more 100 lash for me. No more. That makes my heart itchy. He sing them pieces.
But don't sing it if it takes that much effect.
No more 100 locks for me, many 1,000 gone. No more pint of salt for me, no more. No more pint of salt for me, many 1,000 gone. No more peck of corn for me, no more. No more peck of corn for me, many 1,000 gone. Jesus died to set me free, oh yes, oh yes. Jesus bought my liberty, thank him evermore.
Powerful stuff. And you hear Mr. Riley doing that, "No more pint of salt for me, no more." That's a direct correlation between what ethnomusicologists call the West African falsetto hoop. So in the 1940s, Mr. Riley was still incorporating a West African falsetto hoop in his singing style. The next song I want to play for you is called Moonlight Tonight. It's by Gordon Conley of Glenhaven. She collected this one in 1950. It just gives you an example of the kinds of songs that people were singing about the sea. So here's Gordon Conley singing Moonlight Tonight.
Moonlight tonight, boys, starlight tonight. Moonlight shines on the water. When you are a dreaming mother, when you are a dreaming mother, when you are a dreaming mother, don't forget to dream of me.
The last song I want to play for you is that song I mentioned earlier, the Nova Scotia song, or Farewell to Nova Scotia. I'm sure if you come from Australia, you know you know that you're probably tired of hearing Waltzing Matilda or any of those other iconic songs. But this is one that stirs the hearts of every Nova Scotian, and this is actually a piece of manuscript paper produced by Doreen Senior. And this was, Helen Creighton first recorded this in 1933 from Anne Greenough. Here it's listed as Mrs. Dennis Greenough because that's the way they were doing it back in the day. But unfortunately, Helen didn't have recording equipment when she first visited Mrs. Greenough. So here's the 1943 recording of Walter Roast, another of Helen's most prolific singers from East Chesapeake, which is just about 40 kilometers away from Halifax, singing a little bit of the Nova Scotia song.
Farewell to Nova Scotia, the sea-bound coast. Let your mountain dark and dreary be. For when I'm far away on the briny ocean tossed, will you ever heave a sigh and a wish for me? The sun was sinking in the west. The birds were singing on every tree. All nations seemed inclined for rest, but still there was no rest for me.
A quick little story about this before I finish. The television show that I worked on, Sing Along Jubilee, there was a very famous singer by the name of Catherine McKinnon on that show, a beautiful soprano voice, and she really made Farewell to Nova Scotia famous all across Canada. And then in the 1960s, Helen was doing a film, and the film board went down and actually filmed Walter Roast singing this song. And at the end, he added a coda. We traditionally sing, "Will you ever heave a sigh and a wish for me?" And then we do it slower. "Will you ever heave a sigh and a wish for me?" Well, Helen went up to him afterwards and she said, "Well, Free," she said, you didn't sing it that way when I first recorded it from you in the 1940s. And he said, no, I didn't. But that's the way the Kathleen McKinnon sings it on the television, so it must be right. Thank you very much.
Clary, thank you so much. I can see the virtual applause rippling around the room on the screen. That was, as I knew it would be, absolutely fascinating and very moving in parts. Such a delight. Such a delight to hear those voices and those songs. And I think we pretty much all wish we were here for another hour so that we could listen to more, but perhaps more another time. So we have some time for questions. We have about 5 minutes left for questions if anybody would like to. While people are thinking, I'd like to ask the Mi'kmaq song. Have you any idea what they were singing about? What?
I'm sorry?
The Mi'kmaq song that you played us.
Yes, it was a gathering. It was a gathering song.
Yeah.
What's happening with that material now is that the Public Archives of Nova Scotia, this is incredibly exciting. They're in the process of digitizing Helen's entire audio collection, and it will soon be up at the Public Archives site for everybody to have access to. But what they're doing, at my suggestion, and of course their own suggestion as well, is that they're working with people within the Mi'kmaq community, because Helen recorded certain material that was given to her that might not be appropriate, or from the African Nova Scotian community. A good example is she recorded a version of something called a Rising Up hymn. And then the African Nova Scotian community, it's mostly Baptists and they had adult baptism. And you fasted and you came up with a song in your head that you sang as you were going to be immersed in the water. And that was very sacred to you. So some people would not want their Rising Up hymn to be recorded and broadcast. So they're working with people within the African Nova Scotian community. They're working with people within the Mi'kmaq community. We did the same thing. I produced a number of recordings for the Helen Creighton Folklore Society of field recordings from Helen's. And our latest one, called Sankofa, is a collection of the African Nova Scotian material. Well, I knew the background of them, but I didn't know I can't speak for the heritage. So we were very fortunate to invite Dr. Henry Bishop, who used to be the director of the Black Cultural Center for Nova Scotia, to come on board as a facilitator for that too. So it's working within the community. I think one of the interesting things is that I did a series of interviews with Helen, and I said, what's the most important thing that you contributed? She said, I collected it. Now it's there. It's up for other people to do something with.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Margaret Bennett, if you'd like to unmute yourself, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. It was a very interesting down memory lane. Can you say anything a bit more about her collaboration with Callum MacLeod?
Yes. Again, she didn't have the Gaelic, as one of the old people told Helen. Oh, merciful God, you know, John Allen went to meeteth maker, not a word of Gaelic in his mouth. So Helen didn't have that either. I didn't have it. My two of my great grandparents had the Gaelic, but she worked with Callum, and they had a good working relationship. Now there are some. I'm not a Gaelic scholar by any stretch of the imagination. I barely can pronounce a few things, but there are some questions about his interpretation of the songs and his translations of some of the songs and things like that. But I guess the whole thing is that the material is there in Gaelic folk songs from Nova Scotia that she wrote with Callum, and of course then all the field recordings are there too. So it's like I said, it's up to other scholars to come in now and re-examine, because everything changes. Every generation has a different way of doing things. Helen was accused of not collecting bawdy songs. Well, you know, a young woman in the 1920s going into communities trying to collect dirty sea shanties, she said sometimes they were the best, but she would have been run out of town on a rail. So that's basically, unfortunately, Margaret, what I can speak to about Callum's work with Helen.
Thank you, Clary. That was just so interesting. I so enjoyed it. So thank you for all that work that you put into it, and of course your obvious love of what's been happening over the many years now. So thank you. We're going to move on, and we're moving on to hear from Linn Phipps. I know Linn has been working on this project for quite a considerable time, and we're really pleased to be able to hear about it. So Linn, are you with us?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to play you a wee bit of music before I start to share my screen. So this is the lament, or a small snatch of the lament for Macrimman, Hachir Macrimman, and I'll show you one or two things while I do that. Going to find the screen share now. Thank you. And so that was really interesting, Clary. It was awesome, and I want to talk about a partially personal journey as well. And now I've done that on that view, I don't know how to get the next slide. Oh, I do. I can see it down the bottom. Okay, so this is roughly what I'm going to cover. And who are we talking about? Lieutenant Ewart Allen Mackintosh, 1893 to 1917. We see him on the left here at Christchurch, Oxford, 1913. Here he is in his commissioning photograph. He is a wee bit later in a rather more sensible sheepskin. I've done a wee timeline of Mackintosh's life. So, as I mentioned, he was born in 1893 at Brighton, went to school at St Paul's, he read classics at Oxford. From Oxford in 1914, he volunteered for the Seaforth Highlanders. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant. In 1916, he awarded an MC. I'll mention that a wee bit later. In 1916, also, he was wounded on the Somme and repatriated. He went to England. While he was convalescing, he published his first volume of poetry. The other poetry volume was published posthumously. He became engaged to Sylvia Marsh. In October 1917, he returned to the front with the 4th Seaforths. The Battle of Cambrai, which is very personal to me, raged for scarcely more than 10 days. Started on the 20th of November 1917 with the usual tiny exchange of ground. He was killed on the second day of this battle at Cantaing-sur-Escaut. I mentioned here the German counterattack on the 30th of November for the reason I'll come on to in a moment. And Mackintosh was buried at Orival Wood Cemetery in Flekiet, a village that I am very, very familiar with. I've added to this timeline part of why this is so personal to me. My maternal great uncle, one of 3 great uncles killed in the First World War, was born in 1897. His father died when he was very small. He and my grandfather were sent to live with their half-sister Lizzie at Porlock. She was a teacher. My great uncle volunteered for the Somerset Light Infantry. He was killed at Bonneville Ridge, which is between Masnier and Riedeveen, on the 30th of November, the first day of the German counterattack. He was just about exactly 20 years old. There was no body, nothing came back, not a button. He is commemorated on the panel on the massive memorial for the missing at Louverval. Passing on. I realised I didn't have time to say much about my own personal journey, so I'll whiz through it quite quickly. I was at age 13. I started my own, I'm not sure if it's the right word, passionate interest in the First World War and also Gaelic. And in 1997, I joined the 80-year commemorations at Cambrai. In 2007, the 90-year commemorations, I was introduced to Deborah. I don't have much time to talk about Deborah, but you'll see a wee picture of her behind my picture. I am singing for Deborah in that picture. In 2013, I started planning to organise some events, being one of life's organisers for commemoration of the First World War. I read everything I could, again, having had a lifetime's interest in Wilfred Owen's poetry, and I discovered Mackintosh. I met Colin Campbell, who is his biographer. Colin and I conceived the idea of having a programme of commemorative events, which we ran for 3 years, from 2014 to 2017, which I'll come on to later. I had a very busy November in 2017. I was in Cambrai 3 times for the opening of the Memorial Weekend, Chapel Weekend for Mackintosh. I was singing at the city commemorations, the dinner at Vauxhall, and at Louverval, the memorial to the missing, and then visited Gilbert's Field again. Commemoration for Cambrai became annual in 2018, and I started singing at Ypres as well. I also conceived the idea that we would walk the line of the last day of our 3 great uncles, the days of their deaths. Only 2 of them had a body. Only one had a body. 2 of them were permanently missing. That's enough about me. Mackintosh's poetry has many aspects. 2 volumes were published, many themes which I feel are as vivid and compelling today around fear, courage, loyalty, patriotism, loss, comradeship, duty. His iconic poem, which I mentioned I would speak about, is for me In Memoriam, where he wrote this poem for David Sutherland, whose body he could not bring back, and he died of wounds. He wrote it for David's father, and he wrote, "You were David's father, and he was your only son." And at the end of the poem, he says, they were only your fathers, but I was your officer. He had the audacity to claim that you were only his father because his bond as an officer, in his view, was even stronger. Think about it. There are links between his poetry and Gaelic. He did not write in Gaelic, he learnt Gaelic, and he learnt to play the pipes. So Hachir Macrimman, I think I've lost myself where I am. Hachir Macrimman is one of his poems, and so this is an ancient song for the pipes. I played this at the beginning, so Hachir Macrimman is an ancient piping song with Hachir, Hachir, Hachir Macrimman an Gagagnoshi, Hachir Yetaliag, Hachir, Hachir, Hachir Macrimman, Skethir Yagafib, Hachir Macrimman. The pipes may come back, but Macrimman will never return. His poem to a dead soldier references the song Horom Munien Down Boyach. Horom, Horom Munien Down Boyach. But again, the soldier will not return. Anson Glans and Romy Oak in the Glen when I was young. So he used the titles to reference connections with the Gaelic world. My friend Jacob Ravinovitz, who wrote this wonderful book, also identifies the keening of the bagpipes in the way he wrote some of his poems. Right. I have looked at the songs that Mackintosh wrote. In fact, for some of the events we did, I sang some of the parodies. He wrote 15 parodies for the Seaforths to amuse them in the trenches. 11 of them were associated with a tune. He sourced the tunes from popular songs, music hall, opera, hymns and ballads. Usually he would follow the words of the first verse and or the chorus. I intended to sing you all of 4 of them. I don't think I'll have time to do that. So this is my list, my analysis of the poems that he wrote and the tunes he chose, and some notes on them, partly sourced from suggestions from Jacob and other research I did. So these are the 11, that's 1 to 6, that's the 11th, and I'm going to sing you 4 of them, or parts thereof. Okay, so here we are. We are but little Seaforths weak, our pay is 7 bob a week. Whate'er we do by night or day, it makes no difference to our pay. There you go, that's one of them. I'll go on to another one. Here we have the Mountains of Mourne. Oh, Mary, the front is a wonderful place, where a person can't fight without shaving his face. We're not very frightened of shells, so I found, but when generals come near, we all get to ground. I met one in a trench and some tea leaves were there, and we got such a strafing it whitened our hair. So it seems we must swallow the leaves in our tea, where the trenches run down from the sun to the sea. And he talks about the creatures living in his kilt. Oops, sorry, I've gone too far. And the menagerie, he talks about don't think me a coward because every young hero is funking like me. I think he normalised for his man the fear, which we would all have felt if we had been there for sure. The ASC. So this is the tune of The Minstrel Boy, which I discovered was my gran's musical box. The ASC Their shining spars they have girded on, but they left their bayonets behind them. Was the sense, cried the ASC, of taking to France the damn things? Their only use, it seems to me, is to open the infantry's jammetons. And he goes on to talk about rations in a totally ironic way, because they would never have had anything at all desirable in their rations. They were lucky not to starve. And finally, 4 and 20 Barnas, which is to the ball at Kirriemuir. Oh, 4 and 20 bombers gaed out from that bussel, and only ane of them came back, remarking it was hell. Oh, wild did the next time, wild did the new, the lads that did it last time, canna did new. We bummed him for 4 hours until we had to stop, and then there was a row of dots upon the crater top. Oh, wild did the next time, wild did the new, the lads that did it last time, canna did new. So here's to the Kaiser, we'll soon hae his blood. If we canna throw alive, we can ape as a dirt. There you go. So that's the parodies, all there for raising the morale of the troops. So I think it was originally suggested to me that I would talk about the commemorative project, but it's impossible to do that without talking about Mackintosh. So very briefly, in the commemorative project, this is Colin and I can't remember which one this was. We felt that his work deserved to be more widely celebrated. This is what our project was about for 3 years. One poetry event went into the next year. All of it was voluntary. We did all of it from our own pocket, being totally unsuccessful in any fundraising. So the website we created is still there. It's the www.amackintoshproject.com, created for me by one of my children. We did 4 illustrated trails, England, Scotland, 1 in France, and the latter part of his life. We did 2 exhibitions about his being a poet of the Highlands, and one for Rothshire, one for Dingwall. It was a movable exhibition, so it was moved from one place to the other, all on a literal shoestring in the back of a car. We created, I think it was at least 6 events. Some of them were talks, some of them were events to mark the opening of our exhibitions at Caithness and at Dingwall, and we involved the local Gaelic choirs, all of them pals of mine, Dingwall and Melvick too. And we had a big event at the National Library of Scotland, and you can see most of these probably were around the time of Mackintosh's death in 2017. And one later, I was unable to interest any Scottish organisation in having a poetry event for commemorating his poetry. So we managed one which linked up with comparison and a linkage with Jean-Paul Grenier, which was this book here. Okay, and I'll move swiftly on. So coming towards my end now, why isn't Mackintosh better known? My friend Jacob Ravinovitz, who wrote this book, suggested that while he gave heroism its due, Mackintosh's poetry did not conform to contemporary patriotism like Kipling. And he backed neither horse. He scorned both the deceit of jingoism and the jingoistic recruiters, and he scorned pacifism as well. For me, his poetry is direct, it's honest, it's even exuberant. He found who he was through the war and recognised the conflicting feelings that man felt in the middle of battle, the carnage, the waste, the appalling conditions, the heroism and the camaraderie as well. I sometimes think perhaps now, in our more revisionist times, Mackintosh's time has come, and to be more appreciated by today's generation. For me, he speaks as clearly after 100 years as he did before. And I say, because I forgot to say it before, that I think I am the first person for 100 years to sing his parodies since they were sung in the trenches. Colin encouraged me to start to learn them, and I have conceived the idea now of, amongst my next projects, that I will record them all and I will put them all on my Mackintosh, our Mackintosh website. So in closing, I would like to thank Steve and Martin for supporting me to do this talk. I'd particularly like to thank Margaret Bannett, who particularly encouraged me to do the talk, and all my friends who are here, or not here, but have encouraged me, from particularly our boss singing circle. It means a lot to me that you are here. Colin and Jacob, who wrote books, and which I've listed here, the Mackintosh Project website I've listed here. The Salute to Rona Lightfoot, my project for the last year, all voluntary, to record Rona's piping songs. You've heard one, I shall close with playing another. And oops, sorry, I'll just close that all together. So I would like to close, I hope I'm still in time, no one's told me to stop talking, by singing you a snatch of the Lament for Mackintosh. So for all of the events that we had to remember Mackintosh, I sang this song. It is the Lament for Mackintosh, A Mackintosh, and I played the piper playing the Lament for Mackintosh. A Mackintosh is about 500 years old, so it was not written for the war. Now, if I can manage to find it, I'm going to play you the Lament for Mackintosh. Just give me a moment, because it's here somewhere. Lynn, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. What a revelation! I think, along with many people, this is I had not come across Mackintosh before, and congratulations for taking on that project and continuing with it. That's absolutely terrific. So thank you, Lynn. We have John Baxter, who's got in first with a question. John.
Thanks for that, Lynn. I was really interested in the parodies. There are a number of songs like that that seem to emerge from the armed forces in World War I that it's quite difficult to trace. I wondered, did he publish them in some way? I'm aware that troops at the front sometimes had their own publications which they circulated around the trenches. I wonder if this was an example of that. I wondered if you, how were the parodies? Were they just sung, or were they published in some way?
Okay, so in the 2 volumes where his, as far as I know, his as well as his own his own poetry was published. The ones he wrote in his was published in his lifetime in 1916, and the one that was published posthumously, and they're both included in this one which Colin wrote, and this one which is out of print, and this one which Jacob has written, which is not out of print. So all of his parodies are printed in this book here, both of them, and indeed in his original books, which I'm sure nobody can get hold of anymore. He listed the tune, so as I probably went past it so quickly. So he wrote, as far as we know, 15 parodies, and 11 of them had tunes, which are the ones I intend to finish learning. He specified the tunes. They were local, they were popular contemporary tunes. But some of them were collected from people so after his death as well. So there might be more, but they're very accessible. Just that I don't think anyone has actually put all of that together into like one table, which I can now add to the website for Mackintosh, which is having the poem, the tune, and the notes on the poem that explain that it's ironic or whatever. And they are not available anywhere. I mean, except I don't remember if the events that I sang them at before have been recorded. So I'd like to create a new resource for Mackintosh on the website, which will have the words, the parody he took it from, the tune, and the notes.
Thank you for that, Lynn. Liz Milner, if you've got a very quick question.
Okay.
Thank you.
If he was born in Brighton, how did he get to be in a Highland regiment?
Okay, I skated over that. So his parents were from the Alness area. Well, his father was from the Alness area. So he went back to where he felt his roots were to enlist.
Thank you, Lynn. I can see from the comments on the chat that people really enjoyed the things that you were saying, and again, it's been a revelation, and enjoyed your wonderful singing, which for both you and Clary, we all did. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to our final speaker, and Marge, I'm sure, is there.
I'm right. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Thank you, Marge.
Hello?
Yes, you can. So Marge Steiner, who has spoken to us before, we're very happy to hear you again, Marge. And your subject, I think, is going to give us a little.
This is paper.
Yes?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Well, this is on Northern Ireland.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, first of all, I need to tell you two things. All my field tapes have just been deposited in the archives of traditional music at Indiana University, and I hope they will be ultimately digitized and repatriated. But what that means is that the sound clips I can play you have to just be limited to the sampler CD that I put together some years ago. So you're going to be up with some of my singing too. But anyway, and I also want to thank Hillary Warner Evans for getting the sound clips together. So Hillary, if you're here and listening, thank you so much. Here we go. Beginning in this, and I guess I will pretty much, to make it easier, most of this is based on my dissertation, doctoral thesis. I did the bulk of my work in 1978 and 79, finished the degree in 88. I've gone back to Newtownbutler since. Most of the singers are deceased by now, but to make it easier, I will, this is the ethnographic present. Okay. Beginning in the summer of 1978 and into the 1980s, I witnessed a vital living song tradition in Newtownbutler, County Fermanagh, Northern Ireland, and where spontaneous sing-songs took place whether I was there or not, where local songs were still being composed and sung, where ballads and broadsides, more widely known as well, were performed too, especially at home and by women. And the song tradition, it was integral to the accomplishment of social life. And then if I have time, I'll touch very briefly on the changes in the community that I saw up through 2016. Can you put up the maps, Martin? Are you there?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay. Okay, just so people have an idea of where this is. Okay, so the first map basically gives you an idea of where Newtownbutler is with regard to Northern Ireland as a whole. The second, I guess, focuses more on Fermanagh and the borders because Newtown borders counties Monaghan and Cavan. and Clones is the nearest town across the border in County Monaghan. I distinguished 6 song types and whose learning and transmission varied according to venue, gender, and context. So here they are. Number 1, local songs, obviously composed locally and celebrating people, places, and events in living memory. Local songs pertaining to sport, hunting, Gaelic football, and cockfighting were performed during events such as hunting sprees, but also during spontaneous sing-songs in the pub, and those could be sung for sportsmen or non-sportsmen. Number 2, ballads and broadsides sung more widely in Ireland and in the English-speaking world. These were not sung in the pubs, but were sung at home and often sung by women, and we'll hear one in a minute. Number 3, quote unquote, treason songs, which were political partisan songs. And these were sung almost exclusively in the pub and mostly by men. Number 4, stage Irish songs, not associated with particular singers, but often sung by the whole company. Number 5, country western songs, again, not associated with particular singers. These were disseminated through radio, TV, cassettes, and records, and they were sometimes brought back to Ireland by, if you will, returned Yanks, natives who had gone to America and then had come back to Newtownbutler. And number 6, comic songs, often contrasted disparagingly with ballads. And John McGuire sang me The Invitation to a Funeral, which I don't have on the CD, unfortunately. So, song learning. For most, learning began in childhood and was affected by the degree to which family and social acquaintances sang. Acquisition was generally passive during the early years. John McGuire said of his mentor, Tom MacDonald, from whom he learned some 70 songs, "When I was a young boy, I used to sit here just at this fire, and he'd come up here to Cayley. I never asked him one hate because I was that used to him singing. I could lift them off him. Do you know what a small coddy is now, sitting at the fire? I was drinking it all in." And he recalls his mother singing while, quote unquote, knocking about the house. Said Sean McMahon, "You could hear a song that often sung that you would be able to, recall it yourself, sing it yourself, because usually if you're inclined to sing and you're away at a party tonight and there's a bit of a sing-song going, well, the next day, that would all run through your mind and you would try to pick some of them up. You'd either be whistling or lilting them to yourself, and you would find that you had got a verse or two that was right. And the next time you heard it, you got more interested in it. And once you heard a song maybe 4 or 5 times, you were nearly able to pick it up. Ina Latimer took a somewhat more active stance in learning as a youngster. She recalls her singing Uncle Tom. "My sister used to comb his hair and clip his mustache, and she would sit on his knee and he sang the songs to her. Then the children would write down the songs." Evelyn West and Tessie Slowey, the teaching learning process could be a very deliberate one. "Me father would learn us the songs to sing," says Tessie Slowey. Says Evelyn, "Well, I often went with me father to the bog for turf, and he'd be singing, going along on the cart, and I might say, 'Write out that song for me or tell it to me.' He would, and he would learn the 2 of us," that's her brother Jimmy Halpin and herself. "He would learn us the songs to sing." Some singers had access to wind-up gramophones. George Latimer was one of these. "We had an old gramophone and we used to swap records with the neighbors, Neighbors would come over to our house, take away a stack of records from our house and play them at home, then bring us a stack of records. We'd play them at we'd play them at night. And in the summer evenings, if you went outside, you'd hear music. And there'd be someone outside in the garden and across in the neighbor's yard, the old gramophone out in the garden and busy playing records on it. And you could hear this across the country. Among the singers he heard via record were Delia Murphy, Harry Lauder, and American quote unquote cowboy singers. Many who were deemed to be good singers were encouraged as youths to sing in public. At age 7, Evelyn West had to sing If I Were a Blackbird in a local concert where she quote unquote shook like a leaf. And Marianne Connolly and her sister Tessie Slowey performed at dances in Belturbet when they were 12 or 13. As men and women became adults, however, their paths diverged. Evelyn West says, but actually, why don't we actually hear Tessie Slowey at this point sing a bit of Cock Robin, which you would not have had in the pub, but let's hear that.
He said the sparrow at my bow and arrow, I killed Cock Robin. So all the birds in the air went a sobbing and a sighing when they heard of the death of the poor Cock Robin. Hi ho, Tatty, will you go down to the banks of the hi-ho.
Evelyn West said that as a youth, her brother James began attending hunts with their father, Paddy, after which drink and songs would be exchanged at hunting sprees. Quote, James learned different songs and I stopped learning any. Well, I didn't learn any more songs when I got married or, when I started having children. Well, said Tessie Slowey, men's different to women. A man likes to sing in a pub, do you know? Although when I was in Newtownbutler, there were no formal strictures against women going to the pub or attending hunting sprees. In practice, both men and women accepted that notion of difference. Women's place was generally in the home, and they did not have social networks equivalent to the men's. Women could expand their repertoires in several ways. Ina Latimer kept song lyrics in a green suitcase, and the magazine Ireland's Own, as well as commercial songbooks, were also sources for repertoire expansion. When I visited Elizabeth Swift at her home, she leafed through an Irish rote verse songbook, and when she found songs that she'd learned from her mother, she would sing the words she'd gotten from the book and the melody she'd learned from her mother. With only one exception, Tessie Slowey's singing of Matt Fitzpatrick, which was both a local song and a quote-unquote treason song. I recorded no local songs from women. Men are constantly with perceived outsiders in the pub and at sporting events, so that men choose to emphasize their status as insiders in a community whose sportsmen, martyrs, and scenery are far superior to those of anyone on earth. So since women were not in comparable situations, they felt little need to emphasize local songs in their repertoires. And women sang few political songs, as I said. But the strict dichotomies between men and women's songs and singing was an oversimplification. Whether at house parties or wherever they were, women sang along with men, particularly on chorus songs, and they could often prompt menfolk, as Peggy McKenna, who knew her father's songs, that's Tommy Tinney, that she often would prompt him. A woman could be recognized as a singer in her own right if she came from a singing family, was particularly sociable, and could accept male behavior, especially drink. Marianne Connolly, Marianne Connolly was a fine singer, but as was her father, her siblings, and her husband, they were all good singers, and at least 4 of her children were fine singers too. Her house was also a Cayley house, and I could tell you stories about that some other time. Nuala and Moira Boyle Both wonderful singers could participate in risque banter with the men in the pub. But now I want to come to the men. Prior to World War II, men went to cattle and horse fairs, which were venues for hearing songs and for buying ballad sheets. Quote, "In the fairs in Clonus long ago," recalls Tommy Tinnany, "there used to be fairs every last Thursday of every month, and there was always old tramps or boys going about selling ballads. And I'd buy one, maybe a penny at that time." And I'm going to sing, since I don't have Tommy, what I want to sing for you on, I'll sing you a snippet of the Clonus murder, which actually occurred in 1903 when John Flanagan was murdered by Joseph Fee. "He was an honest young man, as all the people know. He little thought in Clonus town there lurked a cruel foe. It shook the county Monaghan when they heard the news was true, that he was cruelly murdered and his age but 22. And from the sinking of the Titanic, "She stopped at Queenstown on her trip for our Irish girls and boys. They were leaving dear old Ireland in a strange land to employ. The last time these poor emigrants gazed on their native shore, sure they nobly died, God rest their souls, we will never see them more." Broadsides persisted into the 1950s. Philip McDermott purchased the song about Canon Maguire and the Feis of Newtownbutler of 1954, partisan song. And George Latimer got a mimeographed Protestant denunciation of what happened in the episode with Sean South in 1957. Everybody knows Sean South from Gary Owen, but this is much less known, of course. So let's hear a snippet of George Latimer.
Which one is that, Marge?
It's something like the Protestant denunciation of, I think it's the last, is it the last song that you have? I know we went through this before. If you can find it, if not.
Is it the Bold 15?
No. It says something about
16 song about the Brookborough raid.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
"So here's to the policemen and beamen also. Take Oliver's advice wherever you go. In God put your trust and your powder keep dry. And our motto will be, we will conquer or die."
Wow, that's the first time I've... Oh, I'm sorry.
Men that are guarding our cause, protecting our freedom, religion, and laws. They keep guard at night and these raiders keep back. They have but one flag, it's the old Union Jack.
I hope I can still be heard. It's kind of coming in and out at my end. But anyway, of crucial importance for the men were the sing-songs which were integral to the conviviality at hunting sprees and in the pubs. Each man was expected to contribute to the atmosphere of good cheer and the reciprocal exchange of song and of drink that was always in force. I observed that singers were compensated not only with drink, but also with the rapt attention of the audience and vociferous expressions of approval. "Good man, up Maguire," while the song was being sung. The support that a person could get, not to mention the free drink, could spur a man to start singing, even if he did not come from a singing family. Quote, "I started singing when a crowd of fellows was singing, and some of them would say, 'Well, come on now, Jimmy Cairns,' or 'Sonny Cairns,' or whatever they called me. 'Give us a blurt of a song. Do you know that way?' Well, in every company, do you see, everyone's asked to sing, especially in the country places where there's 4 or 5 and a bit of a night. Even if he can't sing, they'd say, give us a verse anyway, something. And then maybe you'd start up. And the camaraderie at Sing Songs spurred John Maguire to start singing even in England. Well, I used to sing in the pubs. Well, if you only had 2 verses of a song, it was enough. Get her over, I'll buy you. Men could sometimes even exchange songs in writing, particularly within the context of hunting sprees, in which men were not in immediate day-to-day context, and if they believed that each other's songs weren't quote unquote in the country. Thus, John Maguire gave Hugh McCaffrey the Hardy Sons of Dan in exchange for Matt Fitzpatrick. So I want to go to the 5 functions of folk song. So here we go. Number 1, the tradition provided a mechanism whereby singers and audience members could selectively invoke and affirm particular identities that encompassed a sense of place in the community. Number 2, the tradition provided means of conflict management. 3, on the other, conversely, enhanced group solidarity. Number 4, the tradition posed ethical concerns. And number 5, functioned as entertainment. So let's take each of these in turn. Newtownbutler residents invoked a sense of place or belonging, not only to a physical environment, but also to a cultural one whose values and whose values were set forth through a mythos and sense of history. Ideally, invocation of a sense of place through song reinforced a sense of continuity in the community and defended against disintegrative forces such as unemployment and modernization. Expressed loyalty to a physical environment could transcend loyalty to competing groups. That physical environment consisted of a central village of 800 souls, its surrounding townlands, and the islands of Upper Loch Erin and the borders. And you saw the map a few minutes ago. So Newtownbutler was seen as a center of people's universe, a bastion of security, synonymous with home, family, and neighbors who ideally would provide help and companionship. So strong was that identification with Newtownbutler that a visitor might be asked, as I often was, how long are you home for? Conversely, one must be ever vigilant against outsiders or strangers. But people do resonate with that physical environment that is aesthetically beautiful, but stark, wet, and boggy, and the grassland, unsuitable for tillage, was primarily used for pasture. Folks had to struggle for subsistence, and that could be expressed symbolically in song. One might surmise that the hunt and the hunting songs expressed metaphorically that struggle for subsistence. Huntsmen explicitly stated that the main pleasure of the hunt was the struggle, the chase, and not the killing of the hare. Why don't we listen to a snippet of the huntsman's horn in the early morn?
The huntsman's horn in the early morn, likewise a ringing cheer, awakens all the echoes in the woods both far and near. The hound within his cosy bed, he answers without fear, and to that call comes bounding over woodland, hill, and dale. Now this is an ancient custom of which Irishmen never ride, for with the noble wolfhound our forefathers chased the stride. Unreal. This custom has been kept up as time rolls slowly on. It would charm the heart of old and young, for to hear the huntsman's horn. There was huntsmen gathered there that day from Kilray to Carnmore, back through Martraveely and from Loch Erin's shore. Here I head to our Ned Cruden, of sportsmen he's our star. We humbly bring the cup to
So Ned Cruden was one of the huntsmen celebrated, and the singing of that song that particular day, which was during my first full afternoon at McQuillan's, his nephew and namesake Ned Cruden was there, and I better leave out some of this in the interest of time, but let's see. Okay, so it is no surprise that songs ostensibly about the physical environment also celebrate the cultural and social environment. Thus, the lovely River Finn is not only where the author fished for perch and trawled for pike, but it's also celebrated as a place where the author went to school and where, quote unquote, an Irish king his dwelling had in place in days of long gone by. And let's play a little bit of that. The lovely River Finn.
Lovely River Finn.
Well, our teacher's name was Masterman. What a candy man was he. His assistant was a local girl called Miss McCalfery. There were 50 scholars on the roll and we kicked up quite a din. They were reared in homes convenient to the lovely River Finn.
Within that physical environment, though, were subgroups that were occasionally in conflict. So in public, group loyalties were selectively invoked so that a sense of community would not be seriously undermined. So among those male groups who invoked group loyalty through song were sportsmen, huntsmen, the Gaelic football team, and an informal group of cockfighters. Most of those who sang about sport were themselves sportsmen, including John Maguire, Addie Maguire, Sonny Cairns, Jimmy Halpin, Philip McDermott, and Francie Conlon. I'm a sportsman, Francie proudly told me on our first meeting. When sportsmen gathered to sing, whether fields or to non-sportsmen in the pub, all united to laud the Newtownbutler teams. And I guess we could play the Bold 15 now, or it would fit in later too. So, okay, wait, Gaelic football was a unifying force in the community, even for Orangeman Charlie Mulligan, who could march on the 12th of July, but also play Gaelic football. All right, so let's play the Bold 15 here. This is sung by John Maguire.
And we left in a tempest tree. You might talk of great football down Cavan and Galway. The Findley whites from the plains of Kildare. I'll sing you a song now in praise of another who has took the gold cup out of Erwinstown's care. On last Sunday morning we left in a tempest, 300 supporters to cheer our lads on. Down in Findinniskillen on the shores of Loch Erin, that left-footed Riley led the red and whites on. Oh, again this great victory that will go down in history. We conquered two great teams, Lisnaskea and Rosslea. Here's to Father McQuillan, ever ready and willing. It was him and young Jeremy that carried the day. Here's to this great team that played to a standstill. They brought the gold cup for the second time. May they live on to next year, these 15 great champions, and bring the gold cup back to Newtown again. Hey!
Hello, Marge. It's Sian here. I'm just going to
Alliances. Yes.
Okay. Just to let you know, we've gone a fair bit over time. If you can begin winding up
Oh
now.
no.
Oh, afraid so.
Ooh. Oh no. So, I mean, there's so much I wanted to share with you. So, talk about conflict management and how people would stand expectations on their heads, Catholics and Protestants. They would joke around. Even the sash, the orange song par excellence. Charlie Mulligan would sing, would dare his Catholic singing buddies to sing this, and they would do so, and they would and there would be this taunting, and they would laugh hysterically at this because they were all good friends and they could do this. So there were other, let's see, so what do I do? So there was a sense of etiquette so that you could, so that the songs that you sang kind of said up our side rather than your side, rather than down yours. And Henry Glassy found that too. Number 3, again, redirecting emphasis from the larger conflict to smaller ones, such as sporting rivalries. Then let's see, I also talked about group solidarity. I can maybe read a very brief example of how people got together to coax singers to keep, as they said, the wee thing going. So let me see if I can find that. Okay, I know, because I still have 5. So here's how a lot of people got together to try to get Moira Boyle to sing. John, go on ahead, Moira. Pat, sing a decent song. Moira, what is a decent song? Marge, your pleasure. Willie, your pleasure. Patron, go on ahead, Moira. You girl, you. Willie, unintelligible. Sure, I don't. Anyway, I'll skip down where she says, "Will you help me now? I'm not singing on me own." Marge, okay. Willie, right, good girl, and then she finally sings. So this sort of coaxing, I called it the request denial ellipsis, request acquiescence sequence. So that was one thing. And then they would also sing things like, it's my own Irish home, far across the foam, though I often left it in foreign lands to roam. Though I a city near or far, yet my heart belongs in old Ireland, in the county of Armagh. And I had some other great quotes about how everybody would get together. And Philip McDermott talks about one very memorable sing-song on a Christmas Eve where just everybody. Anyway, so number 4 was an emphasis on ethical dilemmas, family, the importance of family, mother songs, but there were also tensions, so that while family, neighbors, but while all that was enforced during good times, there was also some mistrust and fear, especially of treachery. And I mentioned the song Carrie and O'Donnell. Number 5, boy. And then the final function of folk song was entertainment. That basically entertainment was about the gift giving. So the singer gave a gift to the audience, and then the singer was in turn rewarded with drink and applause. And then, so, and again, and the song, the reward for everybody was a true song that told a story. So a good song, well sung. And boy, I just had to race through this. Anybody who wants to know more, you could email me privately. I've actually published a few things on, and God forbid you could read my doctoral dissertation, and there is going to be a book that is going to be even expanded beyond the dissertation. So I guess I'm sorry I had to race through this. I knew it was going to be long, and it was already an effort to try to give you even this in a short time. So
Oh,
that's it.
Thank you, Marge. No, that was wonderful. You've
Thank you so much.
Lots of applause coming your way.
Thank
You've
you.
touched on
Thank you.
so many fascinating topics through that, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be having quite a few people coming and contacting you. I apologise, we're not going to have time for questions. I know quite a number of people are pressured for time here. But it remains to me to say that the next TSF meeting, we have 2 speakers so far booked in for that meeting. We have Bob Walser and Tom Pettit, and there's a question mark for number 3, so I'm sure Martin and Steve are cooking up something between them.
Oh, okay. I have a thought.
Yeah.
So I don't have to, since I had to race through this, could I do the final bit of my paper if you don't get a number 3?
Right, you need to contact Steve then, Marge, to talk about that. Certainly not my decision. So have a word with Steve.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And of course, thank you so much to everybody who has shared their depth of knowledge and wonderful singing and so many fascinating things. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's been here this afternoon. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot.
Bye then.
We'll say goodbye. Bye now.